How's it going, YouTube? Coming in today with another video, and today, guys, what the brand new is going to be how to deck build in our current format. Now, I want to make this video because the last time I did a deck build video, I feel like a lot of the comments were reflecting that it was too specific and not more generic as far as the deck building process versus the deck that I was building. So today I'm going to try it from a different approach to really explain what I find is very important and how I go about deck building, because it could help you out in the future. So I do hope that you enjoyed today's video, and if you learned something, let me know down below in the comments. If you haven't already checked out my sponsors over at Imperium, Dragonshield, Gem, Cloud, RAW, Grimoire, definitely go ahead and check them all out down below in the description. Also, if you've not started using my TCGPlayer link when you go to buy cards on TCGPlayer, definitely go ahead and do so. Also down below in the description. I really do appreciate it. It costs nothing to you and only supports the channel. But without further ado, let's hop right on into how to deck build. So the first thing I want to talk about today is you got to find out what the popular cards are in the format. If you have to sit on DB for like an hour and just kind of watch games and see what the most common meta cards are, go ahead and do that. There's nothing wrong with that. Cards like Solemn Strike are something that have been popping up more and more and more. Solemn Strike is just such a generically good card, and it's the spot removal. Whenever this card becomes relevant again, it's so solid because, like, if you get hit with a Solemn Strike, not only is it a removal and a negation, it also plays around talent, which is insane. And then you can also just like stop a summon like a Chaos Angel that otherwise would be really hard to deal with. Solemn Strike, right? It just makes your life so much easier. The other cards that are a bit more obvious right now, the Striker package, Book of Eclipse, Talent, and Nibiru should be a 3 of in your main deck right now. Almost any deck you're playing, even if it's like Melodious, you're still maining Nib because that card is absolutely phenomenal right now. So that's one thing where in a format you have to find out what your must-have cards are. What are the cards you absolutely need to be successful? The other one is going to be something like Book of Eclipse. This card may not be necessary, but if you're playing against a lot of the Desiree boards or the Detonator or both, you want a Book of Eclipse because you're baiting something out or you're just resolving an Eclipse, and it's probably the best situation for you. This also goes for the cards that you don't even see being very popular right now. So maybe Kurakara is a really good option for you, right? This is something where you want to take this time to really do some in-depth research. You could even find a time when a deck was similar. So, for example, a lot of people compare Riziel to Cash because you're ending on the 3k boss monster, right? So that's something where you can be like, okay, what are some cards that are really good during Cash format that could be okay now? So compare and contrast with different formats is going to always be a really sufficient way to find out what your best tech cards are going to be. So the next thing here is going to be figure out which ones you cannot use and rule them out. So if you can't really efficiently use like the Striker package, we're not using those. So I really like to get all the popular cards and put them on a can use and cannot use list, because that's something where you really get a good idea of why. Because if you're putting these cards in your deck and you don't know why they're there, and then you just find out later on that they're just kind of useless, that's really putting you behind for no real reason. So make sure that if you're adding tech cards to your deck list, you know why they're there and you know what matchups they're really good for. One of the biggest things that I see people mess up is they don't know the correct amount of non-engine that they're allowed to add in their deck. One thing that I always recommend to other people is going to be reverse engineering, and this is something that I do quite often. And it really does allow me to fit in every single thing that I want in the format and then start worrying about the deck itself. Because if you're playing in a format and you know that 4 cards are the best cards in the game at the moment, you should try to put those in your deck first and then find the deck that works well around them. Because you got to remember, the best deck at a given moment is the deck that can abuse the best cards at the time. If your deck cannot abuse the best cards, you're putting yourself in a downward slope for literally no reason. You're fighting an uphill battle every time you play the game. So I like to start with my hand trap lineup. What are the best hand traps in the game right now? Fua is definitely very solid. I know that a lot of people are preferring like Perulia, but right now it's seeing just play as a one of with Crossout usually in your list. And Fua is seeing like main deck play, so Fua is definitely very strong. Do you need Fua? You don't need it, but it is nice. Obviously, if you have it, it is very expensive, but don't feel like you need it to play, because you still can get around without it. but you do want it, right? So Ash is just generically very good. You want it. Nibiru is a mandatory 3 of anything you're playing right now. It's just so good. Nibiru is just such a crazy card, and even being able to drop it, if your opponent summons so many times, you can drop it on your own turn, which I've done. It's so good, and you can bait out a lot of interruption like that as well. Imperium, fantastic card right now, going as a 6 card into like a detonator. And then Bishals, because Fiendsmith cards are literally everywhere. It's like 90% of the decks right now, which is kind of crazy. Any important non-engine, this is usually the time for your things like Droplet or Talent. 3 of Talent, 3 of Nibiru. They just have to be in your deck right now. It's a mandatory 6 cards no matter what deck you're playing. So this is just it for mandatory non-engine. And then we're playing 3 different engines in this deck, so I really wanted to show you what it's like to go through and build a deck when you have to kind of smash so many things together to make it work. And you have to have a good amount of cards. A lot of times you don't want to be pushing 60, so you want to go an engine at a time. And what we do is what we call streamlining it, where you only play the most essential count of the cards, and you have to determine which engine is going to be your primary engine. So usually I will end with my primary, start with the least important, and work my way through. So with my first engine, I'm only playing 1 Unicorn, 1 Fenrir, 1 Birth, 1 Raidsaw. So I think this is perfectly fine, because if you see the Unicorn, then you have 2 free bodies, essentially, because you summon the Unicorn, then bring it back. If you have the Fenrir, then you get the Unicorn for follow-up. If you draw the Birth, that sucks. If you draw Raidsaw, you see anything that you want. So definitely very solid. You're only playing 4 cards in this engine, but it still comes up quite a bit, and it's extra bodies for your Fiendsmith cards. So now we're going to move into our Fiendsmith engine. So with the Fiendsmith cards, it really does depend on which variant you're playing. So I like to always play 3 Engraver. I know some people like to play less or like 2. I like to play 3 because I think that opening Engraver gives you the most optimal board, and it gives you a lot of options because of the fact that you do get the additional body engrave, which is great. Otherwise, you're going like the moon line. But I'm also only playing 1 track. Again, when I think the word streamline, I just want to play the essential cards and just as few as possible, right? Because we're trying to be able to cycle through every engine, and every engine in the deck typically gets you into like the other engine, right? So definitely very important to just play as few as possible. 1 Larry, it's still just mandatory. We have the 1 Lacrima and the 1 Fiendsmith in Paradise. So not a whole lot of cards. It's 7 here, where I know I was talking to my friend the other day. I think it was Alex, shout out Alex, and we were talking about like the adventure engine, where you went from like 11 cards and a brick to like 8 cards and no brick, right? This is even like 7 cards. And I mean, like Fiendsmith in Paradise is like a kind of a brick. It's like a soft brick. If you're in a combo anyways, you can just like set it and that's fine. But pretty crazy. But the Fiendsmith engine here, and then we're going for the 3rd engine. So this engine doesn't really change a whole lot. Some people trim it down a little bit. I don't, because I like to see as many of these cards as possible. 3 X, 3 Ice, 3 Sword, 1 Node, 1 Field Spell, 3 Bonfire. Plug-in, you could play it. I don't like it. It's like okay. I know that Triff didn't play it either in his list when he won. I don't really like plug-in, and I understand why he didn't play it. Same with Hole Thruster. I think that card's like super mid. But streamlining, right? Streamlining. We do not play the plugin. We do not play the Hole Thruster. So definitely just making sure that each engine is as few as possible, but as necessary as possible. We're on 43 cards, which is fantastic, because again, we're not trying to go super over 40, because you start risking seeing no side cards, and you're also risking seeing no of the non-engine, and your top decks become a lot worse. So that's one thing where you want to make sure that you have a good mix, and 43 is like the magic number for me. I usually don't try to go over 43 ever. So that's one thing where I'm very comfortable with that number, and this is where I can kind of look over the deck list again and be like, okay, everything is really looking according to where I want it to be. There's no call by, which kind of sucks, but going 44 with a call by just seems kind of useless as well. At that point, I'd rather decide like triple cross out and a call by if I'm really worried about it, right? But at that point, I don't really love those cards. I think cross out's always just a side card. Call by is a one of in the main that if you don't see it, you won't miss it, because you just never had it and there's no way to get to it. And if you see it, it's a super sacky one of that'll probably win you the game. It has a lot of positive sides to just play it, but at the same time, You could not. You could try to find something to switch out for it as well. It's up to you. But those are the things that you kind of have to make sure that once you're done with the deck, that you're like, okay, I am not playing these cards, and this is why, and this is okay. And if it's not okay, go and try to find something that you can slim down on. Now, as for the extra deck, I really like putting everything in pods. I did accidentally crop out the Wave King, but Wave King will be in this picture here. So you have Wave King, Excite on Night, Necroquip, Desiree, Requiem, Moon, and Sequence. And this is going to be the pod of your Fiendsmith extra deck. And I think it's really important that you have your extra deck together like this, because this is something that gives you a good idea of what is there and why it's there. And with your packages that you're playing all together, you also want to make sure you have enough room for everything, and that's going to be really important. That's why I cut a Gum Day, because I literally had no room to play it, and that would have been too much. And you'll see as we move along here. The extra deck for the Rizel cards, having the Detonators, the Duos, and the Mirio, it's pretty straightforward. And then we have like our random bunch, but they're not random, they're all very important, and these are the 4 flex spots that are really important to choose because they could be a lot of different things. I went with Baguska, Dweller, Typhon, and SP because I literally could not find a spot for Chaos Angel, and I don't even know what I would cut for it unless I cut like the Wave King line, and I'm never doing that, right? So that's something where I know why the cards are there, I know why they're really important. You could argue that you could cut Dweller for the Chaos Angel and side Dweller. I don't love siding extra deck cards. If I start seeing that my opponent's on these types of cards as well, I want to make a Dweller as soon as possible. And that's really important to me. It also helps you out like really awkward situations when your opponent has something like a Druid Swarm, right? So that's something where you want to make sure that you have that as an option in your extra deck. As for the sideboard, I'm always really paying attention to the decks that I feel like are going to be really important in the room. So my biggest enemy in the room is going to be Malice because of cards like Shifter as well. So I put a lot of respect on that deck. So I'm playing 3 Lancia, 2 Sanctum, and 3 Thrust, because this is something where the Thrust will work universally. The Lancia can work against a couple different decks, and then this is just going to guarantee that if I do play against that matchup, that I have a really good odds of seeing these cards when I'm starting. So it doesn't even matter if I get shifted, because I'm just making my opponent pass turn as well. As for the rest of the side though, again, this is going to be where you want to make sure that you're getting the most optimal usage out of your side, because most of your games are played post side. 1D barrier, of course, for the mirror match. You have Ulti Slayer because the mirror match is crazy, but it's also good against multiple different decks. And then Duster, Lightning Storm. I think those cards are just too prime right now. And, you know, that's one thing where whenever you are going through your deck, you want to make sure that you have a really good idea as to why everything is there. And I cannot repeat that enough. So if you can go through and do exactly what I just did, where you're like, this is here for this, this, and this, and I understand why this is here, and I know there's a better option, or a different option rather than better, and this is why I'm playing this specific card. So as long as what you're doing makes sense, then the deck building and the deck theory, it can be there and be fine. I've had a lot of people that turn down their own deck lists that are usually like not even that bad, because other people said that there was no point to play it and they didn't let you have the moment to explain why you're playing it, right? So definitely take the time, theory, understand the format before you go to an event, and know what event you're going to, because it's going to also affect deck building. I do hope that this gave you some insight today. Follow my Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, and subscribe to my YouTube if you haven't already, and join my Discord. I hope that you guys all have a wonderful night, and I'll catch you on the next video. Thank you.